Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Hertz, and today we will be talking about business ethics. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you the PowerPoint slides that are completed. Again, you have access to the slides that are incomplete. Make sure to go ahead and follow along and fill in the underlined portions of these slides as you go. So today we're talking about business ethics. So business ethics are a set of beliefs that people have about right and wrong, and there are universal ethical standards, and these are the norms that apply to people across a broad spectrum of situations. And when we're talking about business ethics, we're talking about those same sort of ethics from a business perspective. And ethical and legal are not one and the same. Companies can be doing things entirely legally, but still extremely unethically. And it's important that we understand that ethics goes above and beyond legal when we're talking about these types of decisions. And there's a quote by Albert Einstein that said, "I do not believe in immortality of the individual. I consider ethics to be an exclusively human concern with no superhuman authority behind it." So just to elaborate on that statement, I just wanted to make it clear that when we're talking about ethics, we are talking about some pretty deep moral and issues of values and issues of right or wrong, but these are completely separate from religion, completely separate from politics. And when we're talking about ethics and ethical dilemmas, these are really, they're very subjective. Right? An ethical dilemma is really a moral imperative wherein there is no right, there is no wrong answer. There are varying degrees of right and wrong, and it really depends. It depends on the person involved. It depends on the person involved. So the next slide shows examples of how business conduct can fall within legal and ethical dimensions. Individuals and businesses should aim to carry out actions that are not only legal, but also ethical. And not all actions have ethical implications. So there are many examples of day-to-day mundane things that we do that don't have that ethical or moral imperative. And it's important to understand that there are many different things that can happen which don't have that ethical context. And then there are things that have a very strong legal and ethical imperative. Things like embezzling money can be both illegal and unethical at the same time. And when we're applying ethical standards for different people, they will be different in different situations. So it's dangerous, right? It's dangerous because the fact that there are such different opinions about what is ethical, what is unethical, and the fact that there is no right and wrong answer can be dangerous because people can rationalize bigger and bigger and bigger ethical deviations. And we can attempt to correct this problem by applying fixed universal ethical standards. And there is a lot of research that has been done to really break down ethics that transcend politics, that transcend religion, class, ethnic divisions. And there are 6 core values that we've come up with through research in business ethics, and they're shown on this slide. Trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship are all considered to be the core universal business ethical standards. Now, every human being needs to make his or her own ethical choices, and the organization or the company can have a big influence on the quality of those decisions. the interaction between the employee's ethical choices and the organization's ethical choices is so intertwined that it's sometimes difficult to tell where one stops and the other begins. So organizations have found that it has been very, very helpful to have a written code of conduct. And in fact, after some of the ethical lapses at the early part of the century, the early part of the millennium, because of Sarbanes-Oxley, the SOX Act, a lot of organizations, all public traded organizations, are required to have a written code of ethics to help employees maintain an ethical working environment. And beyond that, every company rather, should have a written code of conduct, a written code of ethics, and an effective code of ethics will connect the corporate values with the organizational communication, with training, with action, and every organization will have a different formal code of conduct, code of ethics, but it's so important that even beyond, again, publicly traded companies that have to have them, even beyond that, all companies can benefit from giving employees this information so that they can make those ethical decisions across a very broad range of situations that they come across. So the code of ethics is expected to be successful when the steps listed in this particular slide, and I think the following slide are followed. I'd like all of you. I know many of you are working, and that's why you're taking an online class. I'd really like for you, if you haven't yet, take a look at your company's code of ethics. Ask the HR department if you have a code of ethics, if you can't find it in your files, and take a look at it. These are some steps for implementing the code of ethics. We find a lot of times that when companies even do have pretty broad, extensive code of conduct or code of ethics, the employees don't even realize that they're there. So it's important that all of the employees know that they're there, that there's buy-in from the top, all the way at the top, all the way through to the bottom of the organization, that people get training on it, that it's global in scope. And it's important also to understand that there is a structure in place, a well-established policy in place for employees to report ethical concerns and violations. What we used to see in some of the old businesses in the past is that companies would say, yes, we believe that this is ethical or unethical, but then there was no reporting mechanism. And when employees did come to, let's say, the HR department and say, I'm witnessing this violation, this unethical act, been having this dilemma, people did nothing, right? They did nothing. And what happens if you as an organization don't have policies in place and you do nothing is you end up with whistleblowers. So a whistleblower is an employee who blows the whistle outside of the organization. It's not somebody who comes to the HR department and says, I see something wrong. It's somebody who goes to the media. It's somebody who goes to the police or other authorities and says, hey, this is happening in my company. Whistleblowing is considered an extremely ethical behavior because typically what happens when an employee blows the whistle? Is that good for your career if you were to go blow the whistle? Let's say you watched your company dumping toxic waste into the alley behind your business, and you go out and you call the news and say, hey, my company's dumping toxic waste. Is that good for your career? Is it easy to get a job after that? No. Whistleblowers are doing it at tremendous personal disadvantage. And so we consider this especially ethical. If somebody in your organization blows the whistle, chances are it's because you in your human resources department, in your management, did a bad job of giving your employees a way to blow the whistle. a way to blow the whistle internally, I should say. I shouldn't call it blow the whistle. A way to speak internally, a way to report violations internally. Typically, this can be avoided if you do a good job of giving your employees a voice in the company. And if they have a voice and you take their concerns seriously and fix the problem, they'll never have cause to whistleblow. Now, if even if not, it could still happen. It's important that you establish protection if it does happen for people in your company who do report it outside of the organization. So business approaches fall across a spectrum as shown on the slide. And everybody is going to have, every company is going to have a different approach to ethics, from very, very proactive contributions to no contributions at all to society and outside of their primary obligation. So every business's primary obligation is to its shareholders, every publicly traded corporation, and that obligation is to maximize shareholder value, to increase shareholder wealth, to make money for the people who own the company. But that's not enough. That's a single bottom line approach. Companies have a broader ethical responsibility to many more, not just shareholders. So shareholders are people who own a share in the company. Stakeholders are people who have stake in how the company behaves. So stakeholders include its employees, its customers, its investors, the community it serves, the environment, right? The people, the planet, beyond just the profit. And businesses should refer to their values, their mission, their resources, and their management philosophy when finding their positions on social responsibility. So social responsibility organizations identify their important stakeholders and consider the stakeholders' priorities whenever they're making decisions. It's important that businesses should deliver consumer value by providing quality products at fair prices. Businesses should be honest. Businesses should communicate well with their customers. They should take into account all of their stakeholders. When they do something wrong, a sincere apology along with corrective steps goes a long way in rebuilding a company's reputation. Businesses have to make money for their investors. Like I said, that is priority number one in every publicly traded company. However, in the long run, companies are required to be responsible to everyone, all of their stakeholders, and they have to sometimes trade short-term profits for long-term success. And behaving unethically does no good for a company. Have you heard that saying, doing well by doing good? Companies can do well financially in the long run by doing good deeds in the here and now. Obviously, companies have to meet all legal requirements, and they should see that they spend investors' money wisely, that they're honest about financial decisions, and that they take into account their broader responsibility to society and to their employees, to their customers, and to the community that they serve. So there's been in the past a sort of, it's almost like it's called planned obsolescence. So I don't know if you've heard this term before. So planned obsolescence is a deliberate design mechanism where companies deliberately designed obsolescence or failure into their product so that they can shorten the time between purchasing. So, for example, I don't know if any of you have bought a television recently. Televisions don't last very long anymore, and that's because of planned obsolescence. We know that people don't expect televisions to last 30 years, so companies design televisions to last for 5 years, right? So that they can buy a new computer. This is an example of an unethical business practice. Planned obsolescence is not an effective business strategy. It is, in essence, a way of stealing from your customers, of reducing your quality so that you can increase profitability at the expense of being decent and ethical. And it's important that companies adhere to all the legal requirements in SOX. Like I said, Sarbanes-Oxley was established as part of the financial sort of the financial crisis, or pre-financial crisis, when we had all of the companies like Enron and Tyco and all the countries, all the all the companies behaving unethically and doing some pretty horrible things. And Sarbanes-Oxley set higher ethical standards for all publicly traded accounting firms. There's provisions within SOX to limit conflict of interest issues, require financial officers and CEOs to certify their financial statements. And like I said before, it requires all publicly traded companies to have and to disseminate and train on their code of conduct. So businesses can contribute to society through philanthropy and responsibility, CSR, we call it, corporate social responsibility. Corporate philanthropy includes donations of employee time, money, and products. Some philanthropic organizations adapt the route of cause-related marketing. Now, I want you to think about this, and I want you to ask yourself this question. If you owned a company and you paid your employees to volunteer for a social cause, would you consider that ethical? Would you consider that corporate philanthropy? Think about that. Would that be responsible of your organization? Right? Well, what we would typically consider that would actually be CSR, corporate social responsibility, and it's absolutely an ethical. It's absolutely an ethical way to help society. It's not considered corporate philanthropy because we're not directly donating to the nonprofit groups, but we're taking the actions of the business itself and donating them, right, to the organization or to the social cause. Protecting the environment is probably the most crucial element of CSR to the community for many of the people within the community. The results of sustainability programs have been impressive across a range of industries. We've seen so many companies doing some amazing things. The ultimate goal of a given business in this aspect is to become carbon neutral, either to emit zero harmful gases or to counteract the impact of emissions by removing a comparable amount from the atmosphere through doing things like planting trees. Companies can also buy these sort of points, which essentially is a way that if a company can't do that themselves, they're basically paying somebody else to do it. We call this, it's still considered corporate social responsibility. A couple other things I wanted to talk about. Green marketing or doing well by doing good. Companies can benefit from being ethical in a number of different ways. It's not considered unethical for a company to do well financially by behaving ethically, but it is considered unethical for companies to do things like greenwashing. I don't think I have a slide on greenwashing. So greenwashing is a term that we're starting to see emerge wherein companies will pretend that they're green or just try to do things that make them seem greener than they actually are. That's not the same thing as green marketing. It's not the same thing as being socially responsible. It's okay to get, to market that you're doing a good thing, but it's not okay to pretend that you're doing a good thing. That's when it becomes unethical. Bribery and corruption are they're among the most challenging issues faced by companies and individuals who are involved in any international business. Codes of conduct work best with monitoring enforcement, commitment to finding solution that work well for all parties involved. It's tough when you're operating on a global scale. There's always the concern of ethical imperialism, wherein we take our views here in the United States and apply them worldwide. Now, is that right? Or is ethical relativism a more appropriate response to international corporate social responsibility? It's difficult. It's difficult to say. And I think I don't know if I define the two. So ethical imperialism is taking our views and saying our views are right, and so we should do them everywhere. And ethical relativism is saying, well, when we're operating in another country, let's just follow the ethical norms of that country. And neither is entirely right. And so that's why you can see that this whole issue of ethics is there's so much gray in here. There's it's not clear cut. It's not black and white, right? All right. So a lot of firms are monitoring themselves rather than waiting for some outside agency to come and do it for them. And they do this through the process of social audit. They establish social responsibility goals, and then they determine a process of evaluating those goals. And it's important to note that there are people keeping an eye on companies. We have a lot of, there's unions, there's activist customers, there's investors, environmentalists. People keep an eye on what's happening. So it's important that that companies regulate themselves so that they don't wait for one of these outside sources to come in and say, hey, you're doing it wrong. And for a lot of companies, they evaluate success using a double bottom line approach. So of course, we always have to take into account that financial profit is important, right? And then they might just say, rather than separating out people and planet, they put those two together and just say, we have one of our bottom line is profit, and the other bottom line is CSR, corporate social responsibility. And that includes people, that includes planet, that includes any other social responsibility metrics that we can use. And so often you'll hear it referred to as the triple bottom line or the double bottom line. So, and companies, like I said before, are really motivated to monitor themselves so that they are not monitored and called out by other people, or even worse, in a lot of companies' minds, is that there's the probability or potential that the government could come in and legislate if they don't go in and do it themselves first. Right? All right, so that's it for chapter 4. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you all in the next chapter.